Yesterday, we heard another statement from the U.S. president regarding either a meeting with you or not a meeting with you regarding the Ukrainian crisis. Almost simultaneously, U.S. sanctions were imposed against Russian oil companies. Today, the European Union introduced another set of anti-Russian sanctions. Now, imports of mittens, toys with motors, puzzles, tricycles have been banned. How can you comment on all this? The fact that they have canceled the purchase of our mittens will cost them dearly, it seems to me. And they would be needed in the current situation if they continue to pursue such a policy towards the Russian Federation. As for the statement by the President of the United States, what can I say? In our last telephone conversation, both the meeting itself and the location for it were proposed by the U.S. side. I agreed to this and expressed my views in this regard, saying that undoubtedly such meetings need to be thoroughly prepared. And for me, and for the U.S. President, it would be a mistake to approach this lightly and to leave the meeting without the expected result. It must be said that the U.S. President agreed with this, fully agreed, and said that on their side they would work on preparing this meeting. A number of officials from the current administration would work on it. Some of them he named. And I said that after the U.S. counterpart determines the final list of those who will work on preparing our meeting, we on our side will also announce who will work from our side, the Russian side. But at the first stage, without doubt, the first steps in this direction should be taken by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, Lavrov, and Secretary of State, Rubio. Well, that is what we decided. Now I see, I am familiar with this statement. The U.S. President decided to cancel or postpone this meeting. Rather, he speaks of postponing this meeting. What can be said, dialogue is always better than some kind of confrontation, than any disputes or even more war. Therefore, we have always supported the continuation of dialogue, and we support it now. Now, regarding the new sanctions, first of all, nothing new here. Yes, they are serious for us, of course, it is clear, and they will have certain consequences, but they will not substantially affect our economic position. Well, in the first iteration of his presidency, it is known that President Trump then introduced the largest number of sanctions that had been imposed against the Russian Federation up to that time. They have, of course, two aspects today, purely political and economic. Regarding the political one, what is really at issue? This is, of course, an attempt to exert pressure on Russia. But no self-respecting country and no self-respecting nation ever resolves anything under pressure. And undoubtedly, Russia has such a privilege to consider itself in this list of self-respecting countries and nations. This is first. Second, this is the purely economic component. Yes, if we talk about the political part, then of course this is an unfriendly act towards Russia. This is obvious. And it does not strengthen Russian-American relations, which have only just begun to be restored. Of course, with such actions, the U.S. administration inflicts damage on Russian-American relations. But regarding the economic side, I repeat once more, of course, there is nothing good or pleasant here. But if we look objectively and professionally at this economic side of these sanctions, what do we see? Now, the U.S., they have production of about 13.5 million barrels per day, taking first place. In second place, Saudi Arabia, about 10 million, and the Russian Federation right behind with about 9.5 million barrels per day. But the US consume 20 million. They sell some and buy even more, mainly in Canada. So 13.5 they produce, 20 they consume, and the Russian Federation and Saudi Arabia sell more oil and petroleum products. I may be wrong in something like that. On the fly, I might mix something up, but approximately the order will be similar to the real one. And what are they? Oil and petroleum products. Saudi Arabia sells to the external market about 9 million tons. Russian Federation, 7.5 million. That is, our contribution to the world energy balance is very significant. And now this balance overall, and in the interests of consumers, and in the interests of producers, it is established. To disrupt this balance, this is a very ungrateful matter, including for those who try to do it. Why? First of all, it must be said that overall now production is on a plateau. Of course, some part can be substituted. Of course, not all this is impossible. But some part of Russian oil and petroleum products on the world market. But first, this requires time. Second, this requires large investments. For the first time, we heard from the International Energy Agency recently that it proposes and encourages participants in economic activity to invest in hydrocarbon energy. Until now, everything went the other way. It was said, including within the International Energy Agency, that investments should be made in alternative energy sources. Yes, should. But it became clear that without hydrocarbons in the coming years, decades cannot do without. This is obvious in connection with the growth of consumption. The world economy is growing, and energy resource consumption is increasing. So to sharply ramp up at the moment does not seem possible. And if the amount of our oil and petroleum products sharply decreases on the world market, prices will rise. And with my American counterpart, we also talked about this. What will this lead to? This will lead to a sharp increase in the price of oil and petroleum products, including at gas stations. And the U.S. is no exception. And if we take into account the domestic political calendar in the same states, it is clear how sensitive some processes will be in this connection. And those who suggest to the current administration such decisions, one must understand for whom they work. But never mind. For us, what is important is different, that we feel ourselves confident, stable, and despite certain losses, they, of course, will be connected with many circumstances. Nevertheless, our energy sector feels itself quite confidently. But I hope that this will not lead to serious changes on the world market, although all now must think. I agree with the International Energy Agency to think about the fact that it is necessary to invest in traditional energy, in traditional types of energy. We are doing this and intend to do. If, in the end, we still transition not to some pressure, but transition to a serious conversation on the future, including and in the economic sphere, then we have many directions for joint work. We overall are ready for this, but this, as we see, depends not only on the Russian Federation, but including on our partners, in this case, American. Thank you. Please ask questions. Zvezda TV, Konstantin Koreshkov. On Western long-range weapons, how do you view the contradictory signals from Washington? Yesterday, Washington Post and Wall Street Journal reported the U.S. lifted key restrictions on this weapon. Trump then said no aid. An hour ago, Zelensky claimed Ukraine will get weapons striking nearly 3,000 kilometers. Is this escalation? It's an escalation attempt. Strikes on Russian soil with such weapons will provoke a severe response, if not to say stunning. Let them think about this. All good.